Hey guys, hope you're having a nice day, and it's time to talk a little bit about Genji. So, Genji is a ranged assassin who excels at both extremes of combat. He is really good at melee, and he is really good at very long range of combat. In the middle of it, he is kind of meh, because you can't necessarily land your shurikens consistently, right? And the swift strike would dash you into a place that you maybe don't want to go just yet. But yeah, it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird how Genji is, but that's what he feels like to me. So let's start with basics. First of all, Genji's DPS, damage per second, isn't as good as other heroes. For example, at a basic level, at level 1, Tracer, using her full kit, except her ultimate, does more damage per second than Genji would do. Using his shurikens, using his swift strike and his auto attacks, comboing them perfectly, Genji will still fall behind Tracer in his damage output, and Tracer would only use her auto attacks and the melee ability. She would still be ahead. So that's where Genji stands as a damage dealer. But he's an assassin, so his job isn't necessarily to do damage. His job is to dash in, do a ton of damage super fast, and dash out. So if Genji had decent damage output, he would probably be a little bit overpowered, in my opinion. So it's good. It's good that Genji doesn't have sustained damage, but he excels at doing bursts of damage. And the way to do that is you need to kind of weave in your abilities and your auto attacks. You want to weave in them together and make sure that they synergize, because lots of Genji's abilities override his other abilities and his auto attacks. But we're gonna talk about that a little bit later. So first of all, let's start talking about the way his auto attacks work, because it's not necessarily standard, but it's not too different from other heroes either. So first of all, you might notice that Genji launches 3 shurikens every time he auto attacks. You might think that he would work the same way as Lucio does, for example. When Lucio starts his auto attacks, he will always launch a couple of those sound blasty projectiles, and they are guaranteed to hit a target unless they blink or dash out, and Lucio will just keep doing that as long as he is in range. Genji works a little bit different. He still launches 3 shurikens that will do guaranteed damage unless your target has a dodge stack, or unless they can blink. I don't think you can dash away unless you have a very long range, as in maybe you can dash from an auto attack, but close range dash, for example Vala's, probably won't work. So Genji locks on, launches 3 shurikens. The way it works is as long as you stand still for a split second and you choose your target and attack them, Genji will start his auto attack animation. He will then, after the auto attack animation has started, now you can move. Now you can move around, and Genji will continue auto attacking. But as opposed to Lucio, who would just keep attacking as long as you are in range, Genji won't do that. So you actually need to start a step as Genji. So you want to stop, choose your target, attack animation starts, you can move around, that's how you start your step. Then you stop again, choose either another target or reissue the attack command on the same target, and then you can move again. It might be a little bit weird at the start, because if you are like me and used to playing Overwatch characters and Heroes of the Storm, you have your Tracer, you have your Lucios, they don't need to start a step, they just have their auto attacks going consistently. So when I started playing Genji, it was a little bit weird at the start, but then when you realize that Genji is a little bit more standard, it kind of clicks with you at that point, and you can start properly executing Genji's timings. And this starter step, attacking on the move mechanic for Genji, it also works in melee range. If you go into melee range, Genji's auto attack animation will change, but he will still be able to auto attack on the move after you issue an attack command properly. And even better, you can start at melee range and move into range, and start gaining range on your target, and Genji will switch from his from his blade to his shurikens, and like the first attack would be melee, and the other two would be just throwing shurikens at them. So that's kind of awesome in my opinion. Yeah, so the good thing about Genji's auto attacks also, not only the fact that you can move while attacking, but your one basic attack is basically split into 3. So Genji is really good at dealing with heroes that have block charges, dodge charges, things like that. Genji just can pop them with one basic attack, instead of using a couple of basic attacks to do that. He's definitely not as good as Tychus or as Tracer at dealing with those block charges, but he is kind of good enough. Let's talk about his abilities now. So Genji's trait is Cyber Agility. It has a 10-second cooldown, and it allows you to jump, which is kind of cool. So you can jump over terrain, over anything, so long as you have enough range for it. And the range is quite decent, so you can jump over most walls in the game, I would say. Some of them are definitely a little bit too wide for Genji to traverse, but most of them, they work. And like the more you use it, the more you realize where you can and where you cannot jump around, so it kind of, with practice, you will understand Genji's mobility a little bit more. But the cool thing about his trait is, let's say, have you ever played Li Ming with her teleport ability? And very often you will try to teleport over the wall, but you don't have quite the range, so you teleport into the spot that you're standing in. Cyber Agility does not trigger. Like, if you are trying to jump over terrain with Cyber Agility and you don't have the range, it will not trigger. So it allows you to properly use it. Like, the game won't punish you for misjudging whether you can or cannot jump over the wall. And it also allows you to kind of spam your Cyber Agility until it works. It's definitely very, very forgiving. So just use it. It can save your life quite a lot of times. And also, obviously, you can use it to get proper engages, you can use it to jump over the walls and dive the forts, and use your deflect to kill everybody or just die. Whatever happens, there happens. But you can definitely jump over the walls, and over keeps, and over the core. I believe you can jump over the core. I'm not sure. I think you can. I feel like you should be able to. Or at least jump into like a diagonal pattern and just like traverse, not like 100% over the core, but like 80%, like to the side a little bit. That's kind of good enough. So your first basic ability is your Shuriken. It costs 15 mana and it has 3 charges, and the cooldown is 12 seconds. But it's not the cooldown per charge. When the cooldown expires, you get 3 charges back. So you always want to use shurikens like at least once. Like when the engagement begins, you use shurikens once, just almost randomly, you don't even need to land them. So that your cooldown will trigger much faster, and that way you will get 3 charges of shurikens when the team fight is at its peak, and that would allow you to do a ton of damage, because shurikens are probably the primary source of Genji's burst damage, if you don't count his ultimates. Remember, I was saying that you need to weave your auto attacks and your abilities. So if you use shurikens in the middle of your auto attacks, it will cancel the auto attacks and 3 shurikens will be thrown. Cause it's a 3 charge ability, like the shurikens have 3 charges, and it resets every 12 seconds. You should always weave your shurikens in the middle of your auto attack timings. Because Genji's attack speed, he does 1 attack per second. So you throw out 3 of your auto attacks, then you throw out your shurikens, and then you can start basic attacking again. And then after those basic attacks finish, you again throw out shurikens. That's how you always want to do damage as Genji, because that's how you maximize your damage output. And the most important aspect of shurikens is probably the fact that they do more damage than your basic attacks. So if all 3 of your shurikens hit the same target, it will do more damage than almost 2 volleys of your basic attack. Yeah, so you definitely want to make sure that you hit as many shurikens as possible. It's so weird, like talking about shurikens, but his auto attacks, his basic attacks are also shurikens, and it kind of all mixes up together. I hope it's easy to understand when I'm referring to the ability shuriken and when I'm referring to the basic attacks in form of shurikens. Hopefully that's understandable. So our next ability is Deflect. It costs 70 mana and it has 16-second cooldown. I mean, this ability is... It's like, it will either completely destroy the enemy team or it will do almost nothing for you. Because the way it works is kind of ridiculous. So when you use Deflect, you start channeling for 1.25 seconds and you become protected for the duration. You can still be stunned, you can still be like pushed, knocked back, and because you are channeling, a knock and knockback would count as an interrupt. Same way it works for when ETC, let's say, pushes Nazebo when Nazebo is using his Ravenous Spirit. When ETC uses his W ability, Nazebo's Ravenous Spirit is interrupted. Same will go for Deflect. So be careful when using it. It's very, very important to use it precisely when you need to, right? So the way it works is every time you get damaged by anything, a hero, a minion, a boss, whatever. Every time you get damaged during this channel with the Deflect, you do a set amount of damage, which scales based on Genji's level and Genji's ability power. You do a set amount of damage to the closest enemy or the closest hero, prioritizing heroes. So if there is a minion between you and the enemy hero, it will still hit a hero if you're in range. It will do a set amount of damage, so it doesn't really matter how much damage you actually deflect. What really matters here is how many hits per second you can deflect. If you can maximize that, I mean somehow, if you can somehow maximize that, Deflect can completely ruin the enemy team. Like, let's say they have Tychus, Tracer in the same team, they have some sort of attack speed buff, and then they have Abyssal cloning either Tychus or Tracer, and all of them start attacking you while your Deflect is ready. The moment you press Deflect, half of the enemy team will just die, if they keep attacking you. If those heroes with their insane attack speeds will just keep attacking you, they will probably die. And more to the point, Deflect, using Deflect on Brax's holdout, if you use it versus a boss, you need to time it a little bit because that boss sometimes uses his abilities and his abilities don't really trigger damage as often as his auto attacks. But basically Genji can do 25% of the boss's health simply by deflecting. And you can choose to go for a certain talent at level 7, which would reduce your Deflect cooldown. So I think you can just solo the boss, because you will have your Deflect up every 6 seconds. So if you can somehow survive 4 times for 6 seconds before you can deflect again, you should be just fine. So like if you go with Genji and one other tank and you kind of trade the aggro of the boss and let Genji just deflect of all of that boss's damage on Praxis back into it, it's actually kind of broken. Oh yeah, Deflect is involved in one of the most ridiculous builds for Genji you can go for, with the AoE, deflecting damage in an AoE rather than only one target. So in very specific scenarios, if you aren't facing certain heroes, that Deflect build might just like, it will just ruin the enemy team. And it's like almost nothing that they can do about it. I mean, people will get better over time with timing their attacks and not maybe attacking Genji as often as they do. But as of right now, you can just wipe out the whole enemy teams in that 1.25 second span. Next ability Genji has is Swift Strike. It costs 75 mana and it has a 12-second cooldown. This is probably the hardest, well, maybe not the hardest, Deflect might be the hardest ability to master on Genji, but Swift Strike definitely needs you to understand how it works, because it will always dash you a set amount of distance. So if you aren't careful about it, or if you misjudge your positioning just a little bit, you might end up being somewhere you just don't want to be at all, and you will probably die. Like, let's be honest here, if you charge into a fort and you miss a hero that you wanted to swift strike, there's nothing you can do to escape, so you're just gonna die. But yeah, the reason why I said if you miss a hero is because after you hit a hero with swift strike, you have 2 seconds to kill, and 2 seconds means that you can toss your shurikens out, you can toss a volley of auto attacks, you can toss another set of shurikens, and that's when they should die. If they don't die in that span of duration, your swift strike will not be reset. So yeah, the hero, if the hero is hit with swift strike and they die within 2 seconds, swift strike is reset, so you can either use it to continue your onslaught on the enemy team, or you can use it to just go back to safety, which is probably the better usage, unless the whole enemy team is sitting at like 10% health and that's like the perfect scenario for Genji. You are so ready to swift strike in, and then variant taunts you and you die. But that doesn't matter. I really feel that Genji is really good right now, but you need to be also really good as Genji. Like, the things you can do are ridiculous, but you also need to be very precise. Even Swift Strike, it has a very thin hitbox. So if you miss it just a little bit, like if you just don't align it just a bit, there's nothing you can do then, right? Like, you Swift Strike in, again, I keep saying that, but that's usually what happens with Genjis. Like, they miss their Swift Strike by just a percentage, and then they die. Because they missed one of their abilities. And that's something you cannot do as Genji. As Genji, you want to land almost everything. If you are missing your shots, if you are missing your skill shots, I would say it's okay to miss shurikens. Landing 2 shurikens is what you should be aiming for, because sometimes it's straight up impossible to land all 3 of them. Like, for example, unless you are facing a tanky target with a huge hitbox, like Esmaden, if you are, let's say, facing Tyrande, in order to hit all 3 shurikens into Tyrande, you need to stay in melee range with her. If you are not in melee range, there is almost no way you can hit all 3 of them. Like, you can be slightly off from the melee range, like just a little bit, and still hit 3, but if you're at medium range, there is no way you're gonna hit 3 shurikens. So you should be aiming appropriately. Like, you shouldn't just center your aim on Tyrande, you should just offset it a little bit so that 2 shurikens will hit her. And that's very important to understand, because your damage, even though you do kind of decent damage with your auto attacks, but the most of damage of Genji's damage actually comes from his abilities. And if you're missing them, then you are kind of doing nothing. It's the same as Kerrigan, right? If you are missing your combos as Kerrigan, you aren't really as effective as you should be. And same goes for Genji. But because Genji doesn't offer any crowd control, he's just a damage output machine, right? So if you don't output the damage that you need to kill people, you are basically useless. And I guess that's understandable, right? You want to be doing damage if you want to do damage, right? Genji is one of those heroes where it's kind of like on another level. The importance of being good is kind of on another level, and if you can't hit that, you probably won't be as impactful as Genji as he should be. So now let's talk about his ultimates. First ultimate, Dragon Blade. It has 80-second cooldown and 50 mana. What this does for you is, for 8 seconds, you unleash the Dragon Blade, and while it is active, you can either reactivate your ultimate or press Q or the appropriate Shuriken button to launch forward and do a kind of like a lot of damage in an arc in front of you. It's actually a big arc, and the damage dealt is compared to hitting 2 of your shurikens and an auto attack. Like, a full set of basic attacks and 2 shurikens equate to the damage of Dragon Blade. So it's a ton of damage, and it's guaranteed damage, right? You can miss your shurikens, you can kind of miss your auto attacks, I guess. Like, you can aim your basic attacks into a wrong target or whatever. That's something that you should not be doing, but that happens. and actually quite often, whereas Dragon Blade will do guaranteed damage in an arc in front of you. So it's really good in scenarios when like when your team is based around that, around doing as much AoE damage as possible, and let's say you have Mosh Pit, you have Graviton Surge, and you have heroes like Gul'dan with you, so both of you will just wipe out the whole enemy team if the Mosh Pit is landed, right? That's when Dragon Blade is useful. Also what it does for you, and it's very important, when using Dragon Blade you can still use your Swift Strike, you can still use your Deflect, you can still use your Cyber Agility, I think. I'm pretty sure you can still use the Cyber Agility, so you should still be using those abilities, don't forget about them. If you just spam your Dragon Blade, you will die. So like pop Dragon Blade, do maybe one swing of the Dragon Blade, then the whole enemy team will kind of try to kill you, because you are now doing the most damage on your team, probably. So they want to eliminate the threat as fast as possible, and that's when you use Deflect. And obviously, if you get stunned in the middle of your Dragon Blade, it gets completely wasted. So when going for Dragon Blade, it's a very aggressive move. It's like you should be picking this ultimate when you are sure that you won't be interrupted. If they don't have Varian, if they don't have Meridian, etc, heroes that can completely shut you down, Dragon Blade is an awesome choice because you would do just so much damage in teamfights. Also what Dragon Blade does is it works similar to Swift Strike. You know how if you hit an enemy hero with a Swift Strike, if they die within 2 seconds, you get another Swift Strike for free. Same goes with Dragon Blade. If you hit somebody with your Dragon Blade ultimate and they die within 2 seconds, your Swift Strike is reset. One of the engage combos, I guess, you would be using is like you are outside of the fight, for example, and the fight breaks out and you want to move in position. So you open up with Swift Strike. It's okay if you dash behind the enemy team, it doesn't really matter. You use your Swift Strike, you use your Dragon Blade, and then you use your Cyber Agility to jump into the range when you can, where you can actually do damage with Dragon Blade, and then you start slashing at people. So hopefully the cooldown on Swift Strike is reset, so you can either disengage or continue the onslaught. And that's kind of how Dragon Blade, in my opinion, like in the perfect situation, that's how the Dragon Blade should be used. Obviously you can just pop it inside the whole enemy team and just start slashing around, but again you need to be very careful. It's a lot better as Genji to not be present in a fight. That gives the enemy team kind of a sense of safety maybe, and they start wasting their stuns, their crowd control onto other targets that maybe they caught somebody on your team and they want to really kill them. So they use all of their crowd control on the target, and that opens up the opportunity for Genji to just charge in from a bush or from a smoke screen and just completely evaporates the other team, because now they don't have any cooldown. So use that to your advantage. And I feel like that's the Genji's strength. His strength isn't his damage output, it's not even his abilities that are so strong, it's the fact that you can be hidden. You are almost a stealth hero that can kind of engage anytime he wants to. I feel like Genji is best compared to Zeratul, only that Zeratul does a ton more damage than Genji does, unless we are talking about insane potential damage from the Deflect, and the fact that Genji is AoE based, so he can use his Dragon Blade and his other ultimate to do a ton of damage in an area where Zeratul is primarily a single target damage dealer. You can go for the Cliff build, but it has its fall-offs. But yeah, Genji, definitely comparable to Zeratul. Like if you are enjoying playing Zeratul, try Genji, it might be really fun for you. And mastering Deflect is something that's really damn cool. Like the potential is infinite, right? And so you are always trying to maximize, to min-max it. It either backfires really like completely into your face because you were a little bit too greedy with your Deflect, right? And you didn't press it in time, some stuff like that. But when it works, when you actually pull off some crazy, like you can block so much damage with it and do so much damage in return that it's insane. So let's talk about Genji's another ultimate. It's X Strike. It is a 90 mana cost and 80-second cooldown. Landing your X Strike is actually kind of hard. The perfect setup for X Strike, it would be a Graviton Surge from Zarya, because it will pull everyone into the center of the ultimate, and that's where X Strike does the most damage. When you activate it, Genji performs 2 slashes in an X pattern that deal quite a bit of damage, and then after 1.25 seconds, it would do a burst of damage in the area of those slashes, so double the amount of damage each slash did. So, I mean, for example, one slash does 130 damage, the other slash also does 130 damage. Then these slashes leave marks on the ground that explode after 1.25 seconds, and they would do 270 damage. And by the way, they don't stack. 2 slashes, they cross, so you would think that in the center, instead of doing 270 damage, you would do 540 damage. No, only one explosion can trigger. Only one explosion damage can trigger. So that's how it works. But obviously, because it's an X-shaped pattern, the most damage you could possibly do with an X-strike would always be in the center. Because that's where you hit with the first slash and the second slash, and then the explosion. So obviously it works the best with the Graviton Surge. But, I mean, Dragon Blade can almost do the same thing. The difference between these two ultimates is an X-Strike is probably a lot more of a defensive choice or a burst choice. Because you would be able to use Dragon Blade like every, I think, 1.5 seconds. Because it takes the animation time and then the cooldown resets and you just keep slashing. Whereas an X-Strike, it will do more damage than one hit of your Dragon Blade, but less damage than 2 hits of your Dragon Blade, and it makes you completely invulnerable. Like, you just disappear from the battleground, nothing can touch you while you're doing your X-Strike. Whereas with the Dragon Blade, you would need first of all to hit 2 of your Dragon Blades to outperform X-Strike, and in certain scenarios you aren't even able to pull off 1 of the Dragon Blade hits, not even talking about 2 here. So if you're facing a team with lots of crowd control, X-Strike should always be your primary choice, because you just won't be able to pull off the Dragon Blade properly. Now let's talk about builds for Genji. So first of all, there are three primary builds you can go for. It's the Swift Strike build, the Shuriken build, and the Deflect build. I mean, makes sense, those are the 3 basic abilities, right? All 3 of them are viable, and all 3 of them are effective at certain scenarios. At least in my opinion, at least in my experience, in my opinion, that's how it works. So, for example, your Shuriken build with the extra damage when you hit all 3 shurikens into one target, and with the piercing shurikens, the Shuriken build is really good versus a team that has a lot of tankiness. Versus a team that has a lot of huge hitboxes. Like, maybe they are not tanky, but they are big targets. So for example, Kaltas would be very vulnerable to the Shuriken build, because you are almost guaranteed to land all 3 shurikens into a Kaltas, since he's just so wide. I don't know why, but he is. He's just huge. Compared to Jaina, who is so tiny and small that you have to go for Swift Strike build, because you will never be landing 3 shurikens into her, because she will just kill you, like she will turn around and kill you with her burst damage. So yeah, you have your Shuriken build versus huge tanky targets, you have your Swift Strike build versus smaller squishier targets, because when you are choosing certain talents, for example Final Cut, Strike at the Heart, they just can't survive that amount of damage that fast, more often than not, and I mean, you will just kill them. You will kill them faster than with your shurikens, because with the Shuriken build, it's all based around, let's say, use 5 charges of shurikens to kill somebody, because you toss out 3 of your shurikens, weaving them with your auto attacks, then you use your Cyber Agility, because you chose that quest talent at level 4 gives you back 2 charges of shuriken every time you use the Cyber Agility. So you use 3 charges of shurikens from the start, use your Cyber Agility, you kind of catch up to your enemy again, and then you continue tossing 2 charges of your shurikens. And that's when somebody more or less tanky dies, and at level 20 with the piercing shurikens, you just become really good versus certain heroes, for example Arthas, because otherwise Arthas would just pop his ghouls to block all of the shuriken damage, but with Sharpened Stars, the level 20 Shuriken Pierce talent, you don't care about ghouls. Your shurikens will pierce, and all 3 of them will probably hit Arthas. and he would take that extra damage from your level 13 Shingan talent. And that is huge, because Arthas can't really deal with magic damage that well unless he goes for anti-magic shell, for example. So yeah, that's why you go for Shuriken build, in my opinion. Then you go for Swift Strike build because smaller targets, smaller health pools, you probably won't be using 5 charges to kill anybody. I mean, it can be helpful if the enemy team kind of peels for each other all the time, and if you are going for the late game, that's probably the other thing. If you are going for the late game, Shuriken build is probably better. It's a little bit more sustain damage based, rather than with the Swift Strike build, it's all about killing the target as fast as possible. And that's why it's good, in my opinion, versus squishier targets. Because you can engage them and kill them super fast after your team weakens them a little bit. Because that's your job as Genji. Your job isn't to do as much damage as you can. Your job is to kill targets super fast. From somewhere they don't even expect you. They shouldn't even expect you to kill them when you kill them. That's like the perfect spot to be in as Genji. And that's when you go for the Swift Strike build. Because it gives you a little bit more mobility with that level 13 talent, Flow Like Water. Although I still prefer Shingan for the Swift Strike build, because Genji is surprisingly good at dealing with structures because of your shurikens. And getting that extra crit damage when you hit a structure, hit a building, or hit a boss, Shingan, I feel like, is a better choice than Flow Like Water. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. Because there is, even if you are missing all of your shurikens, there is still a chance that you will hit all 3 of them, and it can really pay off. Also, for the Swift Strike build, I definitely prefer Final Cut over Steady Blade, because, I mean, let's be honest here, Steady Blade only amplifies your damage by 20%. So like the thought behind this talent is that you would use your Swift Strike to kill somebody, and then you will switch targets and try to kill that guy, and now you do a little bit more damage, so you can do like the chain killing a little bit more consistently. But Final Cut does exactly the same thing, except it does a lot more damage than Steady Blade would ever offer you. It's just the downfall is there is a 1 second delay before the damage hits, but like you either just straight up kill the target without the need for Final Cut or the Steady Blade, or the enemy will probably just stand there for that 1 extra second. Very rarely people actually escape the Final Cut damage, because usually when you Swift Strike, it's onto somebody who is already stunned or crowd control in some way, so that you can get guaranteed damage output as Genji. You should never Swift Strike just on your own. Never do that. You will die. And then the third build, probably the most ridiculous and fun, well, not fun for Genji, not fun for the other team, is the Deflect Build. So you pick up your Perfect Defense at level 7, you pick up your Reflect at level 16, and you pick up your Zanshin at level 20. And what this does is, when you reach level 20, instead of reflecting damage onto the closest hero or the closest enemy, you will always reflect damage into all the heroes that are in range of your Deflect ability. And what that means is, after choosing level 16 talent Reflect, 33% of the damage blocked by Deflect is also reflected on top of your just standard damage numbers. If, let's say, Kel'Thas decides to Pyroblast you, if Artanis uses his laser ultimate on you, if things like that happen, and you just happen to stand in the middle of the enemy team, and you just use Deflect, and they have no way of stopping it, all of them will die. Like, everyone around you will just die. Like, that is insane. It completely changes your playstyle in Genji to the point where you almost want to suicide all the time. Because if a team fight breaks out, it's a 5v5, both teams start trading damage and whatnot, and then you charge in as Genji. You actually let yourself get stunned, you let everyone kind of converge on you and start killing you, because they say, oh, they see the weakness. If you have a really good healer on your team, and if you are a healer of Genji who runs this Deflect build, don't Divine Shield him, first of all, don't do that. That's an awful idea, it won't do anything. But if you have cleanse, which you probably should be running as a healer, if you have cleanse, just cleanse Genji in the middle of the enemy team when they are trying to kill him, because he will use his deflect, and even if he dies after his deflect ends, by the time that happens, the whole enemy team will be sitting at like 40-30% health, and then your group of 4v5, even though you lack the numbers now because Genji died, you should be able to clean up. This is a very bad, like, don't do this. Like, don't run this build unless you're just trying to have fun or whatever. Like, it's so greedy, and it can backfire really bad, because even though Genji has decent damage output with his like basic talents, if you don't specialize in the Swift Strikes or Shurikens, your damage is lacking. By the end of the game, when everyone is leveled up, has lots of healing, lots of sustain, lots of damaging abilities, damaging talents, you will be lacking the damage output. And if you cannot execute the deflects and do that insane damage in an area around you every time you engage when you are diving the backline of the enemy team, you won't really do much. And you are basically dragging your team down at that point. So if you aren't really sure about this build, or if you are running with like random people who don't really want to deal with your shenanigans, right? Probably just don't do that. They will get upset. You don't want to do that. You don't want to upset people. Just stick with standard stuff. But if you're sure, and if you can pull it off, like, deflect can be absolutely devastating. Like, it's a whole new level of boss throws, right? Boss has died and now both teams are fighting for that capture point. And then you're the last man standing as Genji, and everyone just tries to kill you because, I mean, that's the only Genji, he's only one here, we can just all kill him. And then you use the deflect and everyone dies. I was able to pull it off a couple of times. It felt kind of dirty. Literally the only thing you do is you Swift Strike in the middle of the enemy team, and then you just use deflect. And then you try to get out after it ends. That's all you do. That's all you do. And you can do insane damage. But yeah, as I said before, every time it didn't work, I lost the game. Like, my team lost the game because, I mean, I felt useless. I didn't have any damage. I couldn't really kill people, so going for a little bit more consistent build, like the Shuriken build, for example. Also, I feel like Shuriken build is probably the best like starting off point for Genji if you want to learn the hero, to learn how far you can go with him, how much damage you do, kind of get used to Genji. Shuriken build is probably the best to start with because it doesn't require you to risk your life in order to be effective. You can just throw your shurikens every once in a while and it will do decent damage, especially at level 20. Just like a general rule you want to follow as Genji, always think about your cooldowns and your abilities. Because if you Swift Strike in and your deflect is on like 1 second cooldown and you forget about it, that will lead to your death. Also, your abilities override each other. So let's say you use deflect and then you use cyber agility. Deflect will stop and you will jump. So while jumping you will die because you use deflect to protect yourself, but because you jumped you stopped that protection, so you will die. Your shuriken overrides deflect. Like when you're deflecting using your shuriken, it stops the deflect. I think it should stop at least. Maybe you aren't able to use your shuriken while deflecting. That might be a thing, but if you are able to, then the shuriken will interrupt. So also when using cyber agility and then you use, like if you are panicking or whatever, you would use cyber agility and then spam Swift Strike. Just let cyber agility finish so that you can get that extra distance and then use Swift Strike. Because if you use Swift Strike in the middle of the jump will be interrupted and you will Swift Strike. It can be useful in certain situations when you really want to escape. Like if you thought that maybe cyber agility would be enough, but then you quickly realize that Uther is standing right there, ready to stun you with his Hammer of Justice and then the Divine Storm. You will just use Swift Strike and get as far away as possible from that. But be careful because you don't get unstoppable while using any of your abilities. Like that's something you should always think about. Same as Falstad, right? If you dash as Falstad, if you use your barrel roll, but you get stunned immediately when you use it, your barrel will go on a full cooldown because you already executed it. It's just that they interrupted the dash itself. Same goes for Genji. Everything will be interrupted like mid-flight, can be interrupted mid-flight. So be very, very careful when escaping, because hitting your Swift Strike doesn't really guarantee that you will get out. Also, I should probably mention certain talents for Genji, which I think are really, really good. For example, Augmented Guard can be amazing if you are facing Tracer with Pulse Bomb, if you are facing Pyroblast, if you are facing any sort of like targeted abilities that would do a ton of damage, but also is very, very easy to predict. Like for example, you can use Augmented Guard versus Chromie, but you need to be very, very careful, because if you use Deflect before the temporal loop finishes, your Deflect will be interrupted. So you need to use it after you get teleported back, brought back in time. That's when you need to immediately hit your Deflect button. That's when the protection will hit. And you don't even need Augmented Guard for that. You will still block all of the damage from Chromie. It's just that with the Augmented Guard, it will give you 50% of the shield for all of the damage you would have taken, and you would take a lot of damage. Like especially if Chromie has some follow-up from her team, unless they have stuns. If they have stuns, you are basically screwed. But if they don't, you will get shielded for a ton of damage. A giant shield, so you can use those 4 seconds to maybe harass the enemy team before you get out. Cyber Shield might be a decent pickup. What it does is when you use Cyber Agility, you get 50 spell armor. So it can be good when dealing with somebody like Jaina or Gul'dan, when you use Cyber Agility to engage them in melee, and that's where they do a ton of damage. You don't want to stand there, right, as most heroes. But Genji can actually survive that for 2 seconds. You will get 50 spell armor, that would 50% damage mitigation, so you can maybe kill them before they kill you. I don't usually use it. I still kind of prefer perfect defense over cyber shield, but it can be good, I think. Also, dodge is absolutely amazing, because auto attackers are actually really good versus Genji, unless you are Tracer attackers. Everyone else is actually pretty good versus damage. You do consistent damage output onto Genji, consistent damage, and Genji doesn't have a ton of health, so it's the same as attacking Tracer, right? It's either you force them to think whether they want to continue the onslaught or if they want to disengage, and that's a victory in itself. If Tracer or Genji aren't confident about their ability to kill you, it works really well for you, because they are now open to a mistake. They might overextend, they might retreat without achieving anything. And that is huge, that is a win. Also, I prefer Shingan, but double jump also can be used with the Shuriken build. I don't necessarily like it, but double jump plus cyber shield plus Shuriken build can work really well. I don't do that, but that's a possibility. So I think that's gonna be it. So if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. As always, thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.